I should have known something was wrong the moment I stepped off the bus. The air was too still. Not a breath of wind stirred the trees that surrounded the desolate road, and the silence. It was suffocating. No birds, no insects, just the distant rustling of leaves, the kind you only hear when something's watching, waiting. But I was too tired to care. I was looking for answers, and this forgotten town was my only lead. It was supposed to be a quick stop, just a few days in the old cabin my uncle had left me after he died. No one had lived here for decades, but something about the town's history intrigued me. The locals, if there were any left, had a way of speaking about it like it was a cursed place, but they always said it with that sort of hollow, resigned look in their eyes. Still, I pushed those thoughts away. I had a job to do. I needed to investigate. I hadn't realized how quickly night would fall. 1 minute, the sun was creeping lazily behind the horizon, and the next, the dark swallowed everything whole. The road that led me to the cabin was long and winding, flanked by towering trees that seemed to press in on me, blocking any sliver of moonlight from reaching the ground. The trees were thick, unnaturally so, as if they were growing together to protect something in the middle of the woods. When I reached the cabin, I could barely make out the faint outline through the growing fog. It wasn't much, just a small, weather-worn structure, the kind you see in old photographs of places long abandoned. The windows were boarded up, but the front door creaked open as if it had been waiting for me. I unpacked quickly, not bothering to light a fire. I had heard enough about this town to know that you didn't want to make a fire at night. The last thing I needed was to attract the wrong kind of attention. A strange feeling crawled up my spine as I settled into the cabin, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I chalked it up to nerves. It was a creepy place, sure, but that didn't mean anything. But then, I heard it, a soft scraping sound outside the cabin, like something dragging against the ground. My heart skipped, but I didn't move, didn't make a sound. Maybe it was an animal, maybe a branch had fallen, and was being blown by the wind. But the scraping came again, closer this time. I stood frozen. I couldn't help myself. I crept to the window and peeked out through the gaps in the boards. I saw nothing, just the trees, thick and oppressive, cloaked in shadow. I told myself it was nothing but my mind playing tricks. But when I turned back toward the door, the air felt colder, the kind of cold that seeped into your bones. The next few days were a blur. I spent my time combing through old town records in the local library, trying to make sense of the strange disappearances that had plagued this town in the past. But the more I read, the less I understood. People had vanished, entire families without a trace. No one had ever spoken of it, not directly, but the rumors were there. Whispers of dark forces in the woods, things that lurked just beyond the tree line, watching, waiting. I laughed it off at first. After all, small towns have their superstitions. But as the days passed, strange things began to happen. I'd wake up to find things in my cabin moved, objects shifted a few inches from where I'd left them, books with pages torn out and scattered across the floor. I tried to dismiss it as my own forgetfulness, but deep down I knew someone or something was inside my space when I wasn't looking. And then the whispers started. At first, it was just faint, a murmur in the wind. I thought it was my imagination, but they kept getting louder. Soft, indistinct voices just beyond my reach. Always whispering, always calling. One night I couldn't stand it anymore. I ventured out to the woods. I needed to know, needed to confront whatever was out there. I could feel the weight of eyes on me as I trudged into the thick, oppressive fog that clung to the earth like a living thing. The trees closed in, and the whispers turned to murmurs, the words no longer lost in the wind but clear, cold, and mocking. My breath hitched as I realized the voices were coming from within the woods behind the trees. Suddenly, a figure appeared in front of me, a shadow too tall, too thin, standing motionless among the trunks. I froze, heart hammering, blood rushing in my ears. My legs felt like lead, but I forced myself to take a step back. The figure didn't move, but I could feel its presence like a heavy weight pressing on my chest. The longer I stared, the more I felt like I was being pulled into its gaze. The air grew colder, the whispers louder, closer, until they were almost deafening. I tried to scream, to run, but my feet were glued to the ground. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Then, just as quickly as it had appeared, the figure disappeared into the fog. I stood there, heart racing, eyes wide, my body trembling in fear. I ran back to the cabin, slamming the door behind me, but even inside, I couldn't escape the feeling of being watched. The whispers didn't stop. They never stopped. I tried to leave the next morning, but the road out was gone. It had vanished overnight, swallowed by the trees. There was no way back, no escape. And that's when it hit me, the town. The people, the disappearances, it was all tied to the woods. The woods weren't just alive, they were hungry. It was the trees that called. The voices, they weren't from the people, they were from the forest itself. And as I looked out through the cabin's boarded windows, I saw them, the shapes moving between the trees. There were no longer just whispers. There were figures emerging slowly from the darkness. They were coming for me. And the worst part, I knew I was never meant to leave. I was never meant to be found. Now, as I sit here, with the fog thickening and the trees closing in, I can hear the whispers louder than ever. They're almost on top of me. They tell me not to fight, to stop struggling. Because the forest, it already owns me. And soon, I'll be just another shadow in the dark. I don't know what I expected when I decided to visit that town. It's been months, yet I can still feel the cold of it. The silence that never quite left. It's all a blur now, but I'm certain it wasn't a mistake. At least, I thought I was. That was before the sound started, that damned sound. I'd been on the road for hours, driving through dense woods that seemed to stretch on forever. My phone had lost service an hour back, and the gas station I passed had been the last sign of civilization. The signs for Willow's Crossing were half missing, forgotten by the rest of the world. My car's headlights flickered briefly as I took the final turn, but I didn't think much of it. The place was supposed to be quiet, isolated, perfect for a writer like me, looking for peace and inspiration. The first thing that hit me as I parked outside the rundown inn was the smell, musty, like something old and decaying. I shook my head, hoping it was just my mind playing tricks. It was a small town, too small to have any decent stores, just a handful of houses clustered together like they were trying to keep their distance. But the air, that stifling stillness, I couldn't shake it. Checked into the inn, the owner, an elderly woman with dull eyes, told me to mind the path down the woods. The local superstition, she said. Don't walk too far past the clearing, she muttered, and I didn't ask her to elaborate. It was, after all, just a town's eccentricity. It wasn't until nightfall that I started hearing things. The inn was empty, aside from the woman, and I was alone in the lobby when I first heard it. Footsteps, soft, slow, shuffling. They were coming from the old, crooked stairs that led up to the second floor, the kind of noise you'd expect in a place this old. I thought it was just the wind playing tricks. The next morning, I tried to shake it off. I grabbed a few things, telling myself I'd explore the nearby woods before heading home. But as I walked down that path, the silence crept in again. The trees above me were too still, the air too thick. I made my way deeper, following the faint trail of footprints. They weren't mine. The tracks led me to a clearing, a perfect, unnatural circle where the grass was yellowed, the soil disturbed. That's when I saw it. Not far off, in the undergrowth, a flash of red. I stepped closer, heart pounding in my chest. It was a ribbon, the kind used to mark a path, but it was soaked in something dark. The scent hit me again, sharper this time, a metallic, coppery stench that twisted my stomach. I turned back, but something was wrong. The path I'd walked, the one I knew, was gone. All that remained was a twisted, gnarled route that led deeper into the woods. The trees had moved. I tried to convince myself it was just my mind, but the air had thickened. The shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally long. That's when I heard it again. The footsteps, only now, they weren't in the distance. They were behind me. I spun around, but there was no one, just the trees swaying ever so slightly, but the sound continued, steady, slow, getting closer. I broke into a run, my breath ragged as the ground beneath me seemed to shift and pull. Each time I looked over my shoulder, I thought I saw something moving between the trees, something tall, thin, impossibly long. I didn't stop running until I stumbled back into the clearing, and there, right in front of me, standing in the dead center, was a figure. It was hunched, its back arched in a grotesque way. I could hear it breathing. The air itself seemed to freeze around me. But the worst part, the part that still sends chills through me, even now, is the face. I could see it, even in the dim light, staring at me. Its skin was pale, stretched too tight over the skull, eyes too wide, gleaming in the dark, and it smiled. That thing, it smiled at me. I thought I was going to die right there. Then I remembered something. The story the innkeeper had told me, the warning. The villagers had been cursed, she'd said. Once they walked down the path, they never came back. The air grew colder, and I felt myself slipping. My knees gave out, and I collapsed. The ground beneath me was damp, and as I gasped for air, I realized the footprints from before were all around me, encircling me, closing in. The figure didn't move, it just watched. It was waiting. I don't know how I got out of there. One moment I was lying in the dirt, and the next I was stumbling back to the inn, covered in mud, trembling. When I reached the inn, the elderly woman was waiting. Her eyes were sad, but there was a knowing in them. She said nothing, only led me inside, away from the path, away from the curse. But the worst part, I still hear the footsteps sometimes. I still hear that breath in the dark, and every time I close my eyes, I see it smile. The villagers never left that path, and now neither will I. I shouldn't have come here. I don't know what I was thinking. I guess I thought it'd be peaceful, quiet, no distractions. Just me, the road, and the endless stretch of wilderness surrounding me. But there's something wrong about this place. Something off. When I first pulled into town, I didn't think much of it. It was small, like 100 other towns in the middle of nowhere. Old, quiet, and weathered by time. The kind of place where everyone knows everyone, where secrets are buried beneath years of frost and dust. The people seemed normal enough, though there was an odd stiffness in their eyes, like they were waiting for something, watching me a little too closely. At first, I didn't mind. I needed a place to stay for the night, maybe two. The innkeeper, an elderly woman with a cracked voice, told me it was the only place open this time of year. You sure you don't want to head back to the city? The roads can be dangerous this time of year, she'd said, her hand shaking as she handed me the key. What harm could there be? The room smelled of mildew and dust. The old floorboards creaked like they were holding secrets beneath them. But none of that bothered me. I was too tired to care. I collapsed onto the bed, the weight of the journey pulling me under. But I couldn't sleep, not really. It was the silence that kept me awake, creeping under my skin, crawling through my veins. It wasn't the usual silence you'd expect from a small town, where nothing stirs. This was wrong. It was too quiet. The kind of quiet that felt like it was waiting for something. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just the isolation, just the kind of place I was in. But as the hours dragged on, I started hearing things, soft, barely audible whispers, like someone was standing just outside the door. I pressed my ear to the wall, but all I could hear was the faint rustling of the wind, cold against the windows. But then it came again, a whisper too soft to make out, but too clear to ignore. I don't know why I opened the door. I shouldn't have, but I did. The hallway was dark, stretching out like a tunnel into nothingness. I could barely make out the silhouette of the stairway at the far end, the dim light casting eerie shadows against the walls. I don't know what I was looking for. Maybe I thought it was just the wind again, or maybe I was hoping to find something that would explain the feeling gnawing at my insides. But there was nothing, no sound, no movement, just the oppressive quiet. I closed the door behind me, but it didn't feel right. It wasn't the same, like I'd disturbed something. I tried to shake it off. The next morning, things only got worse. I went to the local diner hoping for some coffee and a bite to eat. The town was even quieter now. No one was outside, and the air felt heavier, like it was pressing against my chest inside. The diner was nearly empty, just a man at the counter, staring blankly ahead. His eyes were wide, unblinking, fixed on something I couldn't see. I sat at the counter, trying to ignore the feeling that something was watching me. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with a blank expression, placed a coffee in front of me without saying a word. She didn't even look me in the eye. And then I heard it, a low, scraping sound from the back of the diner, like something or someone was dragging something heavy across the floor. I turned to look, but the room was empty, the kitchen door slightly ajar. I should have left. I should have just gotten back in my car and driven until the fear faded. But for some reason, I didn't. That night, things changed. The whispers came back, louder this time. They weren't just whispers anymore. They were voices, low and urgent, crawling through the cracks in the walls. I couldn't tell where they were coming from, but I could feel them, like they were right behind me. I could hear the words now, though they didn't make sense. "You're next." I turned around, heart hammering, but there was nothing there. Nothing but the shadows pressing in like they were waiting to swallow me whole. I tried to leave the room, but the door wouldn't open. It was locked. I could hear the wind howling outside, but it sounded different now, like it was calling to me, beckoning me to step outside. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at the door, my hands trembling. I started to lose track of time, but then I heard something else. A sound that cut through the air like a knife. A knock. It came from the other side of the door. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. The knock came again, louder this time, followed by a voice. A familiar voice, but wrong. So wrong. "You're not going anywhere." I backed away, my legs shaking, and that's when I saw it, felt it. A coldness creeping up my spine, wrapping around my ribs, squeezing tight. The door handle twisted, slowly, like something was testing it, making sure I knew it was there. I wasn't alone. The knocking stopped, and in the silence that followed, the weight of the room felt like it was closing in on me, suffocating me. I knew something was behind that door, something not human. I was stuck, trapped. The lights flickered once, then twice. The temperature dropped so fast I could see my breath, and then the whispers came again. Louder, angrier. "You're mine." I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. It was like my body had turned to stone, frozen in place by fear. I closed my eyes, hoping to wake up, hoping it was just a nightmare. But when I opened them again, the door was gone. There was nothing but the walls and the whispers. I've been here for what feels like days now. I don't know if anyone will come looking for me. I don't know if anyone can hear me, but I hear them, I hear the others. And I know, deep down, I'm not going to make it out, not this time. They've already started to take me. I should have never driven into that town. I should have listened to the warnings, but the place was too perfect on the map, isolated, quiet, and seemingly forgotten by time. I only stopped for a night. I didn't think it would matter. Now, I can't even begin to explain what happened. All I know is I'll never leave. I noticed something strange as soon as I pulled into the town. A chill. Not the kind you'd expect from the crisp autumn air. This was something deeper, colder. The kind that presses on your chest, the kind you feel in your bones. It was 9:47 p.m. when I rolled into the last gas station, a tiny, dimly lit shack. The station attendant stared at me as if he'd never seen anyone before. He didn't greet me, didn't even move as I stepped out to fill the tank. I tried to make small talk, asking if there were any good places to stay the night, but his eyes never left mine. "Town's all you need," he said, voice low, like he was trying to keep something from spilling out. He handed me a crumpled map. I thanked him and got back in my car. As I turned down the main street, I couldn't help but notice how empty it all felt. The buildings were like tombstones, faded, decaying, untouched by time or life. No one moved, no lights were on. The streets were silent, almost too silent. It was too still. I found an old bed and breakfast at the end of the road. The windows were boarded up, but the signs swayed gently, as if beckoning me in. The woman who ran the place had an unsettling calmness to her, like she was expecting me. She didn't ask for my name, she just handed me a key and pointed to the stairs. I took the key without questioning her and made my way up to the room. The walls creaked as I unpacked. The air in that room smelled old, like stale memories, heavy with something I couldn't place. That's when I heard it, the faint sound of something scraping against wood. Not like a mouse, more like nails dragging across the floorboards, slow and deliberate. I froze. My heart hammered in my chest and my skin prickled. I tried to convince myself it was just the house settling, but the noise, it didn't stop. Every few minutes, the scraping would return, louder this time. Like something was moving in the walls, behind the floorboards. But when I got up to check, nothing was there. The bed wasn't much better. As soon as I lay down, I felt as if the entire room was watching me. The shadows seemed to stretch longer, twisting like they had a mind of their own. I pulled the covers tighter, trying to ignore the gnawing sensation in my stomach, the dread crawling up my spine. The clock on the nightstand was ticking far too loudly. I glanced at it, 9:47 again. How could that be? I looked away for a second, then looked back. The hands hadn't moved. Panic gripped me. My breathing quickened, and I sat up, wide-eyed. Something was wrong here. I grabbed my phone, but it was dead, had been since I pulled into town. The darkness around me felt thick, suffocating. I wanted to leave. I had to get out, but I couldn't. It was like the town itself was holding me in place. I heard the door creak open behind me, the sound of shoes shuffling across the floor. Slowly, too slowly, I turned around. There was nothing, no one, but I felt it. Something or someone was in the room with me. I could hear its breathing now, ragged and deep, but still no figure, no shape. I rushed out of the room, my feet pounding against the creaky wooden floor. The hallway stretched on forever, the shadows shifting as I passed. The stairs groaned under my weight, but when I reached the ground floor, it was worse. The house was empty. Not a sound, not a movement. No woman, no guests. Just a deep, unnerving silence. The kitchen was cold, the stove untouched for years. The floorboards were covered in layers of dust. But the door was still locked. The town had swallowed me whole, there was no escape. I heard the scraping again, closer this time. But it wasn't just in the walls anymore. It was in the floorboards under my feet, like something was clawing to get out. I ran to the front door and wrenched it open. The night air hit me like a slap, but there was no one outside, no lights in the houses, no movement, just a frozen, dead town. The sound of scraping followed me down the street, faster now, relentless. I couldn't escape it, I couldn't breathe. The buildings loomed over me like watchful eyes, their shadows shifting, elongating. I could feel the cold closing in. The town wasn't empty. It was alive, watching me. I ran. The clock on the gas station read 9:47. I've been running for hours. It feels like days. I can't escape it. Whatever's here, it won't let me go. Every time I close my eyes, I hear that scraping. It's getting closer, and each time I look at a clock, it's 9:47. I'm trapped, and I think I know now. No one ever leaves this town, not really. I don't know who or what is making the deal with this place, but whatever it has taken me, and now I'm part of it. I don't know why I decided to come up here alone. Maybe it was the promise of solitude or the thought that I could escape the noise of the city. Either way, now that I am here, I'm not so sure. Every corner of this town feels like it's closing in on me, every creak of the cabin's old wood like a warning, and the cold feels different. Like it's alive. When I first arrived, everything seemed so quiet, too quiet. I told myself it was just the isolation, the silence of a town buried under layers of snow and frozen breath. But then, the strange things began. It started small. I woke up one morning to the sound of footsteps in the snow outside. No one was supposed to be here. Everyone had left weeks ago, they said, and the locals, those that remained, always kept to themselves. The footsteps outside were heavy, deliberate, dragging across the snow. But when I went to check, nothing was there. I figured I was hearing things. The isolation gets to you, right? But then the lights began flickering. First, just once or twice, a little buzz before they went out. But after that, they wouldn't stay on for more than a minute at a time. The more I told myself it was nothing, the more it felt like something was trying to make me believe it. Or maybe I was trying to convince myself. By the third night, I woke up to an odd chill in the room, sharper than the usual frostbite that nipped at your skin when you stepped outside. I thought it was just the wind, but the air around me felt thick, almost suffocating. I pulled the covers tighter around me and tried to fall back to sleep, but then there was a noise, a whisper, soft like someone was standing just behind me. I told myself it was the wind. The whispering came again. I shot up, heart hammering in my chest. There was no one in the room, but the feeling of being watched was overwhelming, like someone's eyes were on the back of my neck, never blinking. I turned around to face the dark corner of the room, but it was empty. My breath was coming faster now, and I had to choke down the rising panic. But that sense of being not alone kept growing. The next day, I tried to ignore it. The town had a small general store, a shack really, run by a woman who had a look about her like she knew more than she let on. I went there for supplies, pretending everything was fine. But the moment I walked in, she stopped what she was doing and gave me a strange look. Her eyes darted around as if searching for something, or someone before she spoke. "You're still here then?" I laughed it off, trying to be casual. "Yeah, I'm just here for a couple of days." Her lips tightened and she gave a little nod. "People usually leave before the storms hit. No one likes staying when the darkness comes." I felt that same prickling at the back of my neck, the darkness. She didn't answer, just gave me a long, piercing stare, then turned her back to me. I left soon after, but the air outside felt colder than it had any right to be. The days blurred together after that. More strange things, the clocks. They kept stopping, always at 3:07 a.m. I'd check the time just before bed, set the clock, then wake up to find it frozen at that same cursed minute. The whispers turned into more distinct words, but always in a language I couldn't understand, like it was speaking through me, and then came the footprints again. But this time, they weren't outside. I had just finished showering, steam filling the small bathroom, when I saw the first one. A single print, bare, dirty, and covered in snow, appeared in the middle of the floor. I stared at it for what felt like hours, trying to convince myself it was my imagination, that I must have dragged snow in on my boots. But no, I hadn't. The print was fresh, undisturbed by anything except the cold air inside the cabin. I backed away, my heart pounding. I couldn't breathe, the hairs on my arms stood up. I had to leave. I had to get out. But where? The town was miles away, and the roads were completely snowed in. I tried calling for help, but my phone had no signal. The isolation was absolute. I bolted the door and spent the next few hours pacing, too terrified to even close my eyes. But then, at some point, I collapsed onto the couch. That's when I heard it. A knock, soft but unmistakable. I froze, my pulse beating in my throat. I couldn't move. The knocking continued, slow and deliberate, each thud like a hammer striking metal, reverberating through the cabin. I stood there, rooted to the spot, waiting for it to stop. But it didn't. It just kept coming. And then I heard the voice. It was low, barely audible over the knocking, but it was there. You shouldn't have stayed. I knew the voice, though I couldn't place it. It was familiar, distant, like a memory I was trying to forget. I scrambled to the door, heart pounding in my chest. The knocking stopped. And then the door opened on its own. I couldn't believe it. My hands trembled as I grabbed the knob, twisting it desperately, but it was like something was holding it closed from the outside. I yanked harder until the door suddenly flew open, revealing nothing but snow and the biting cold. Nothing. There was no one there. But the moment I stepped outside, I felt it again. The eyes watching, waiting. I ran. I didn't look back, but the snow was deep, and the storm was worse than ever. It felt like the wind itself was pulling at me, urging me forward. I don't know how long I ran, maybe hours, maybe minutes. But then, just when I thought I was free, I tripped, and I fell into the snow. It was then that I saw it. The figure, standing just a few feet away from me, a shadow against the swirling snow, tall, hunched, with eyes that gleamed like they were burning through the darkness. I screamed, but it didn't matter. Nothing mattered. I ran until my legs gave out, until the cold swallowed me whole. Now, I'm here, sitting in this cabin waiting for the storm to pass. But it won't. I know that now, the darkness, it's not the storm. It's here, it's always been here, and it's not going anywhere. I don't know when I first realized something was wrong. I wish I could pinpoint it, but it all feels like a blur now, one long nightmare I'm still trying to wake from. It started with the silence of the town. I arrived late, long after sunset, tired and sick of driving through endless stretches of nowhere. It was supposed to be a quick stop for the night, just a place to crash before I continued on my way. I didn't expect much from this godforsaken town, the kind of place where the houses are old but not charming. It's the kind of town where you'd assume the population must be dwindling, at best. At first, everything seemed fine. I checked into the motel, a run-down place that felt like it had been forgotten by time itself. The air smelled like damp wood and something vaguely metallic. The walls were thin. I could hear the distant hum of old plumbing when I turned the faucet. But none of that bothered me. It was just the silence. That deep, suffocating silence. The sort of silence that isn't natural, the kind that fills the spaces in your brain and makes every footstep sound like an echo bouncing off unseen walls. At least, that's what I told myself at first. Maybe it was just the isolation. The thick forest surrounding the town might have something to do with it, but it didn't sit right. There was a heaviness to the air that made it hard to breathe. It was like everything was holding its breath, waiting. I should have left that night. I know that now, but I didn't. Instead, I wandered through the town, hoping the night air would clear my head. The streets were empty, not a single soul. Every window I passed had a curtain drawn, every door closed. The streetlights flickered intermittently, casting long, shaky shadows across the cracked pavement. I tried to tell myself it was just some sleepy little place, nothing to be afraid of, but then I saw it. A figure standing at the edge of the woods, just out of the corner of my eye. I froze. The hairs on the back of my neck prickled. I don't know how long I stared at the space where it had been, but when I blinked, it was gone. I chalked it up to tiredness. I was too exhausted, I needed sleep. The next day, I went to the local diner for breakfast. The air inside was thick with the smell of greasy bacon and burnt coffee. The waitress didn't look up when I walked in, her face hidden behind a curtain of dirty blonde hair. The only other person there was a man in a worn-out plaid shirt, hunched over a half-eaten plate of eggs. "How's the food around here?" I asked the waitress, trying to break the silence. She didn't respond, didn't even acknowledge me. I asked again, louder this time, but she didn't flinch. I felt a strange sense of unease creeping over me. The man at the counter looked up at me, his eyes empty, hollow. He wasn't looking at me, he was looking through me, as though I was some sort of ghost in his way. "Better leave while you still can," he said in a low, raspy voice. It was the first time anyone had spoken to me in this place, and his words sent a chill down my spine. I half smiled, thinking it was some weird local joke. "Why's that?" I asked, trying to play it off. He didn't answer, just went back to his food, his eyes never leaving his plate. I should have listened to him. I should have left right then, but I didn't. That night, as I sat in the lonely motel room, I heard it. A soft tapping at the window. It was faint, but enough to make my heart race. I stood, peered outside, but there was nothing. Just the swirling fog around the trees. It was then that I noticed something even stranger. The lights in the town were dimming. Not one by one, like a power surge, but all at once, as if someone was controlling them, manipulating them from a distance. I tried to ignore it, went back to my bed, but sleep didn't come easy. I felt like something was watching me, like eyes were fixed on me from the darkness outside. The next morning, I went to the gas station to fill up before I left. The attendant was an older man, graying hair and a stony face. I noticed something strange about him, his hands shaking ever so slightly. I thought it was because of his age, but now I wonder if it was something more. "Quiet here, huh?" I said, trying to strike up a conversation. "Too quiet," he replied without looking up, his voice tight. "It's not always like this, you know." "Like what?" "Like this," he gestured vaguely to the empty streets, the abandoned buildings, and the cold, oppressive fog that had settled over everything. "It's been years since anyone came through here, years. And when the lights started going out," he stopped, as though suddenly realizing he shouldn't have said that. Don't stay long." I didn't know what to make of his warning, so I smiled awkwardly and turned to leave. But just as I reached the door, I heard it again, the tapping. Louder this time, more insistent. I spun around, my heart pounding, but the gas station was still empty, still silent. I drove around the town one more time, the fog so thick it was like driving through milk. That's when I saw the figure again. This time, it was closer, standing at the edge of the woods, watching me. I slammed on the brakes, heart racing, hands shaking. But when I blinked, it was gone again. I could feel my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. My mind was racing. Was I seeing things? Or was there something here? Something in the woods, watching, waiting? By the time I got back to the motel, I was a mess, head spinning, skin crawling. The silence was unbearable. I felt like I was suffocating under it. That's when it happened. I woke up to a sound. It wasn't tapping this time. It was something far worse, a low, guttural growl, the kind that seemed to come from deep within the earth itself. I tried to sit up, but my limbs felt like lead. I was frozen, unable to move, unable to scream. And then the door creaked open. I could see a shadow in the doorway, blocking out the faint light from the hallway. My heart raced, but I couldn't move. The figure didn't make a sound. It didn't have to. It just stood there, staring at me. I wanted to look away, but my eyes wouldn't leave it. I didn't see its face, but I knew it was smiling. Something twisted inside me, something primal, something that told me I needed to run, needed to escape. But there was nowhere to go. I was trapped. I closed my eyes, praying for it to go away, praying for it to end. But when I opened them again, the figure was gone. I thought I was free, but when I tried to move, my legs gave out. I collapsed to the floor, gasping for air, my mind screaming for me to run. That's when I saw a small bloodied handprint on the wall. It wasn't mine, it wasn't anyone's. I ran out of that motel, leaving everything behind, but I could feel them following me. The lights flickered once again, and I knew they had found me. Now, I'm not sure if I'm still in that town, or if I ever left. The woods are always just behind me, and I swear I hear their growls when I close my eyes. I don't know if I'll ever escape, and I'm not sure I even want to anymore. Maybe it's better this way, but if you ever find yourself driving through a town where no one speaks, and the lights don't stay on, take my advice, leave before it's too late, before they find you. I should have never gone to that town at first. It was just a whisper of an idea, a stop to stretch my legs on the drive. I had been on the road for hours, and the blinding snow seemed to have no end. The radio had cut out a few miles back, and all I could hear was the howling wind, the tires biting into the slick road. I was desperate for something, anything, to break the monotony. So when I saw the faded sign for Tanner's Hollow by the side of the road, I pulled off without a second thought. Big mistake. It wasn't much of a town, more like a ghostly speck in the snow, huddled beneath a thick blanket of white. Only a handful of houses, a general store, and a small diner. I'd been to small towns before, but this one felt off. There was no movement, no life, no sounds other than the wind cutting through the trees. I parked in front of the diner. The fluorescent lights inside buzzed faintly, casting an eerie glow over the snow outside. I tried to push away the unsettling feeling crawling up my spine as I stepped out of the car. My boots crunched in the deep snow as I walked toward the door. When I opened it, the bell above the door jingled, but no one greeted me. There was no cheery hello, no friendly banter, just silence. I stood in the doorway for a moment, looking around. The diner was empty, well, except for one person. An older man sitting at the counter. His face was hidden behind a thick white beard, and his hand shook as he sipped from a mug. Excuse me, I called out, my voice sounding too loud in the stillness. Is this place still open? He didn't respond. I stepped further inside, the door creaking behind me. The smell of stale coffee and something sour filled the air. I approached the counter and cleared my throat again. Hello. The man's head jerked up, his eyes wide, almost unblinking. For a moment, I thought he was going to say something, but his lips twitched into a half-smile instead. He didn't speak. Is there anyone else here? I asked, forcing my voice to stay steady, though I was starting to feel a bit uncomfortable under his gaze. He shook his head slowly like he was pondering the question, then took another sip from his mug, eyes never leaving mine. I looked around, taking in the peeling wallpaper and cracked windows, but it didn't make me feel any better. Something was wrong. The air was thick, like the whole place was holding its breath. The man suddenly stood, clanking his mug on the counter. You should go, he muttered, his voice low and hoarse. My heart skipped. What? You're not? Welcome here, he said, voice trembling now. They'll find you. I laughed, though it came out shakier than I wanted. What the hell are you talking about? He didn't answer. He just shuffled past me, leaving the diner without a sound. I watched him disappear into the snow, his figure melting into the white blur. I couldn't shake the image of his wide, frantic eyes. I don't know what made me stay. I guess I was just so thrown off, so unsettled by the encounter, that my legs couldn't seem to move. I sat at the counter, my mind racing. What did he mean? They'll find you. The diner felt colder now, like something had seeped into the walls. I rubbed my arms, but the chill wouldn't go away. I looked over at the door again, and my stomach dropped. The street outside was no longer visible. Just a blur of snow, thick and swirling, almost alive. It was then that I heard it, a low, distant thump, like something heavy being dropped. Then another, closer this time, and another. My pulse quickened. I rose from my seat, walking toward the window. My breath fogged up the glass as I peered outside, but I couldn't see anything clearly. The snow was blinding, and the darkness beyond the window seemed to press in on me. Thump, a sharp noise like something scraping against the building. I froze. It was coming from the back of the diner. I shouldn't have gone out there. But curiosity got the best of me. I grabbed the flashlight from my bag and stepped outside, the cold biting into my skin as I made my way around the back of the building. The wind howled around me, and I could barely see a few feet ahead. The thumping noise had stopped, but something else had taken its place. A low, guttural sound, like a growl. Me heart raced. I swung the flashlight in the direction of the noise, but all I saw was a shadow, just a flicker of something moving. I backed away quickly, feeling my feet slip in the snow. As I turned to run back to the diner, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A figure stood in the middle of the road. Its back was turned to me, but I could tell it wasn't human. The way its shoulders hunched, the long limbs stretching unnaturally, and then it twitched, jerking forward in a way that didn't belong to any living thing. I ran. I didn't think. I just ran. Heart pounding in my chest. I didn't dare look behind me, but I could hear it. The thump again, and then something else. A sharp, screeching sound, like claws scraping against metal. When I reached the diner, I threw the door open, slammed it shut behind me, and locked it. My breath came in ragged gasps. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. The room was still, silent, too silent. I turned around, my stomach churning. The old man was gone, but there was something on the counter. A small, crumpled note. I reached for it, my hands trembling, and unfolded it. The handwriting was scrawled, jagged, as if written in a hurry. "Don't look outside, they see you." I felt my pulse quicken. I had to leave. I had to get out of there. I ran for the door, but as I turned the handle, I stopped. The street outside wasn't visible anymore. There was no snow, just darkness. And then I heard it, a whisper. "You're ours now." It came from all around me, behind me, from the walls, the ceiling, and then a loud crack. A footstep from the other side of the door. I couldn't move. The terror was paralyzing. The door flew open. I saw nothing but shadow, deep and endless, but I heard them. There were so many of them. Their whispers, their breath. I tried to scream. I couldn't, and then the door slammed shut. I never made it out of Tanner's Hollow. When they found the diner weeks later, they found me sitting in the corner, eyes wide open, lips pulled back in a silent scream. My body was frozen. But they didn't find the thing that was with me. They'll never find it. It's still here, watching, waiting, and now. It is your turn. I should have never gone, but here I am, standing in the middle of a forgotten Canadian ghost town. It's the kind of place you'd only see in old photographs, decayed wooden shacks, rusted street signs barely legible, and the heavy oppressive quiet that drowns everything else. The sort of place that's supposed to be forgotten, but for some reason, I couldn't leave it alone. It started with a map, just an old piece of parchment I found buried deep in a secondhand bookstore, crinkled and stained, with a location circled in faded red ink. It didn't mean much at first, just some odd town near the edge of nowhere, lost in time. But the name, Ashford, stuck with me. I don't know why. Maybe it was the way it rolled off the tongue, or maybe it was the unsettling silence in the air whenever I said it out loud. So I packed my things and drove. The drive was longer than I expected, miles upon miles of unpaved roads winding through endless stretches of forest. And when the trees parted, revealing the town itself, I felt a coldness creep over me. It was too quiet, the kind of quiet that feels unnatural. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. At first glance, Ashford looked deserted completely, not a soul in sight. No movement in the windows, no cars parked along the broken streets. It was like a snapshot of death, frozen in time. But the air, thick and still, seemed to whisper in my ears, almost as if the town itself was alive in some way, breathing with an unseen presence. I thought I was alone. I thought the first sign that something was wrong came when I ventured into the heart of the town, past the crumbling gas station toward the dilapidated town hall. The place was covered in moss, the doors barely hanging on their hinges, but there was something oddly inviting about it, like it wanted me to come in, so I did. The interior was dark and smelled of mold. Broken furniture lay scattered across the floor, and old newspaper clippings covered the walls, yellowed and curling at the edges. I wandered through, brushing aside cobwebs as I went, until I found something that made my blood run cold. A clock stopped. 2:37 a.m. There was no explanation for it. No power, no reason for it to still be there. But the second I looked at it, a shiver shot up my spine. I wasn't sure why, but something about the stillness of the town, the silence, was getting to me. The air was thick, heavy with an unspoken warning, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I turned back to leave, but that's when I heard it. A low, distant noise, the sound of footsteps. Faint at first, like someone walking on gravel in the distance. But the longer I stood there, the closer the sound seemed to get. My heart began to race, and I turned sharply, looking for the source. But there was nothing, just the same dead town stretched out in every direction. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was just spooked by the eerie atmosphere. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was following me. Watching me, the footsteps were louder now, impossibly so, and the air grew colder. I pulled my jacket tighter around me, trying to ignore the creeping dread. I found the old cemetery next. It was hard to miss. The rusted gates were barely standing, the tombstones were crooked, and the earth seemed to swallow them whole. The dead were buried here, but there was something strange about the way the graves were arranged. Too close together, some of the stones were broken, cracked in half, and the names etched into them were so worn, they were unreadable. But there was one that stood out. A stone with the name Ashford carved into it, a single name, no dates. Just that one word. I knelt down to get a closer look when I heard it again. The unmistakable sound of footsteps behind me. I whirled around, my breath catching in my throat. There was no one there, but I felt it. A presence. Something unseen lurking just beyond the reach of my vision. A feeling deep in my bones that I was being watched. I stumbled back, heart pounding in my chest. And then it happened. The ground beneath me shifted. The earth trembled. A low hum, like a whisper, crawled up from the depths of the cemetery. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end as I backed away from the graves. My legs shook with fear, my mind racing. I knew then, with an awful certainty, that something was wrong here. I wasn't alone in this town, not by a long shot. I ran. I ran back to the gas station, hoping to find my car, my escape. But when I got there, it was gone. The street that had been clear when I arrived was now completely blocked off. An impenetrable wall of fog had rolled in, thick and suffocating. I could barely see my hand in front of my face, let alone the road. My panic surged. I tried to call for help, but my phone was dead, not a single bar of service. The walls of fog pressed in closer, like something pulling at my very soul. That's when the whispers started. Soft at first, just like the hum in the cemetery, then louder. I couldn't make out the words, but I could hear the desperation in them, the way they clawed at my mind, scraping away at the edges of my sanity. I stumbled through the fog, my feet heavy and numb, searching for anything. Any way out. The town had become a maze, a twisting labyrinth that led nowhere. Every building I passed looked the same, empty, lifeless. And then, in the distance, I saw them. Figures, shadows moving in the mist. Too many of them to count, all of them drifting toward me with no sound, no sign of life. My heart froze in my chest. They were coming closer. I don't remember how long I ran after that. My thoughts blurred, my body on autopilot, driven by nothing but fear and a desperate need to escape. But the shadows were always there, just behind me. And then, when I thought I couldn't run anymore, when the fog had swallowed me whole, I stumbled into something I couldn't explain. A mirror. A full-length mirror standing in the middle of the street, framed in cracked glass. I looked into it, breathless, my reflection staring back at me. But then it moved. Just a slight movement at first. I blinked, and my reflection didn't blink back. It smiled. The chill that ran down my spine was unlike anything I've ever felt. The smile twisted, stretched impossibly wide, and then it spoke. "Welcome back." I couldn't move. My body was frozen, locked in place by the thing standing behind me. But I could hear it, its breath, hot and foul on my neck, and the whispers from the graveyard filling my ears. I turned, and there it was. The last thing I remember is the blackened sky above, the darkness pressing in on me from all sides. The thing that had been following me since I arrived had finally caught up. I don't know how I'm still here writing this. Maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm just another lost soul trapped in Ashford forever. But if you ever find yourself on the outskirts of nowhere, looking for a ghost town called Ashford, don't turn back, or you might end up like me, one of the lost, forever. I shouldn't have gone. I knew it the moment I stepped off the bus, but it was too late, wasn't it? I had to make my way to that cursed little village. Bayview was supposed to be quiet, peaceful, even it wasn't. Not anymore. The first thing that hit me was the silence. It was like stepping into a vacuum, a space where sound was too afraid to enter. The trees surrounding the village were twisted, gnarled things bent in unnatural ways. Their branches clawed at the sky like fingers begging for release. I didn't know what I expected. Maybe a quaint little town, tucked away between hills, untouched by time. Instead, I found the kind of place where things should stay buried. I should have turned back when I saw the woman. She was standing by the well at the center of the village square, staring at me. Not a look of curiosity. It was colder than that. She didn't blink once. I don't know how long I stood there staring at her, but it was long enough to make the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I didn't wave. I didn't move. I just kept walking. My instincts were screaming at me to leave, but I ignored them. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon when I found the cabin. The owner was an old man, gruff and suspicious, but he had a roof for me. Or so I thought. He handed me the keys and muttered something about the night being a bad time to be outside. That was it. No explanation. No further words. That night, things began to unravel. I remember hearing the wind howling through the cracks of the old cabin, but it wasn't the wind. It couldn't have been. There was something in the walls, something breathing in time with my own breaths. I told myself it was just the house settling, the kind of noises old buildings make. I closed my eyes and pulled the covers tight. It started with the clock. I remember it, even now. The old wooden clock on the mantel had been ticking when I first arrived, its pendulum swaying back and forth. But around midnight, it stopped. Just like that, I rolled over in bed, squinting into the darkness, but the clock was frozen. The silence. It pressed in. Then came the whispers. They were faint at first, like someone was speaking in a language I didn't understand. They were soft, barely audible, but unmistakable. I thought maybe it was just the wind again, but no. The whispers didn't stop. They weren't coming from outside. They were coming from within. They started low, barely discernible, but soon they grew louder, more insistent. I told myself I was imagining it. Maybe it was the isolation, the pressure of being so far from civilization. But then the whispering turned to laughter. That soft, low laugh that makes your skin crawl. It sounded wrong. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. My breath grew shallow. I tried to focus on something, anything other than the laugh. I stumbled out of bed, reaching for the light. But when I flicked the switch, nothing happened. The cabin remained dark. I felt a chill roll down my spine. The hairs on my arms stood up. That's when I heard the footsteps, slow, dragging footsteps that echoed through the cabin. They circled the room, one step at a time, just outside my door. Tap, tap, tap. The sound of something heavy being dragged. I froze. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The footsteps stopped just outside my door. The silence was worse than the noise. I heard my own heartbeat, thumping in my ears. I waited and waited. And then they came. The door swung open. I didn't see anyone, but I felt them. The air grew colder, colder than anything I had ever felt. I could feel the weight of eyes on me. Eyes that were waiting for something. Suddenly, the laughter came again. This time, it was so close, so loud, that I felt like I was going mad. It came from every corner of the room, from the floorboards, from the ceiling. I couldn't take it anymore. I bolted out of the room, crashing into the hallway, my legs shaking beneath me. My head spun. My breaths were shallow. I ran down the narrow staircase, through the door, and out into the night. The village was empty. It was always empty. No lights, no sounds. The street lights flickered like dying candles. I ran down the main road, my footsteps pounding against the pavement. But there was no escape. Something was following me. I could feel it, watching me, waiting for me to stop running. I finally reached the square, the well standing like a silent sentinel in the middle of the street. The same woman was there again, standing motionless. But this time, her eyes followed me as I passed, cold, empty. "Help me." The words escaped my lips before I could stop them. The woman didn't answer. She only tilted her head ever so slightly. Her lips parted in a slow, deliberate grin. And that's when I saw it. The moon, the blood moon, hovered just above the horizon. It wasn't just red. It was alive, pulsating, beating. I could hear it now, too. Thump, thump, a sound, deep and rhythmic, like a heart. I didn't understand it. My mind couldn't process it. It was too much. Then I felt it. A hand on my shoulder. I turned, but there was no one there. The laughter came again, louder this time, too close to ignore. My head snapped in every direction, searching for the source, but I couldn't find it. It was everywhere, in the air, in my bones. I ran. I didn't look back, but no matter how fast I ran, I couldn't escape the sensation that I was being dragged down. Something was pulling me in, pulling me toward the village square, toward the well, toward her. My mind broke. I collapsed in the middle of the street. The blood moon above me seemed to stretch, expand, take on a life of its own. The woman's grin grew wider, and then the whispers. They stopped. Everything stopped. Just as the village swallowed me whole. I woke up in the cabin. It wasn't morning. It wasn't night. It was wrong. The clock had started ticking again, but I was trapped inside the walls of a place that wasn't even real. The whispers never stopped. Not anymore. And every now and then, I hear her voice calling me home. I don't know what I was expecting when I arrived at that tiny village in northern Canada. Maybe peace. Maybe a little rest. A break from everything that had been weighing me down back home. But nothing about this place feels right. Even now, with the door locked and the windows shuttered, the air feels heavy, like it is holding its breath, waiting. It started the moment I stepped off the bus. The silence, no cars, no chatter, no dogs barking in the distance. The town was dead, utterly still. There was no life, not even a flicker of movement from the houses lining the street. It wasn't the kind of quiet that comforts you, like when the world's asleep. This was the kind of silence that wraps itself around you and makes your skin crawl. I'd read about this town before in some obscure travel blog, and the stories seemed harmless, just a forgotten place tucked away in the woods. They talked about its old, charming cottages, the mountains that loomed like silent guardians, and the sparkling river that ran nearby. But when I got here, I realized no one had mentioned the strange feeling that seemed to permeate the air. No one had mentioned the eyes, always watching, always following. The first night was the worst. I stayed at an inn, the only place that seemed remotely welcoming, though it felt like it hadn't seen a guest in years. The walls creaked and groaned like they were trying to hold on to something. Something dark. I brushed it off, told myself it was just an old building, but then came the sounds. Footsteps, slow. Too slow to be anyone walking normally. They echoed down the hall, in the stillness of the night, never stopping. I tried to ignore it, but the sound grew closer, like someone, or something, was standing just outside my door. I bolted awake, heart pounding. But when I checked, nothing was there. No one in the hallway. No footprints in the dust. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next day, the town was different. The fog was thick, rolling down from the hills like something alive. I decided to walk around, stretch my legs, but no matter where I went, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, was right behind me. The streets were empty. Every building was locked tight, the windows dark. I passed a small park near the center, its rusted swing swaying ever so slightly in the breeze. Something about it made my stomach churn. He looked around for someone, anyone, but there was no one. Not a single person in sight. The only signs of life were the birds perched on the trees, their eyes following my every move. As I turned to leave, a flicker caught my eye, a child's face, pale and gaunt, peeking out from behind a tree. I froze, my heart skipping a beat. The child didn't move, just watched me with hollow eyes. I called out to him, but he didn't respond. I took a few cautious steps forward, but when I blinked, he was gone. I told myself I was just tired, seeing things. I walked back to the inn, but the feeling of being watched didn't leave me. If anything, it grew worse. That night, the footsteps came again, but this time, they weren't just outside my door. They were inside. I heard them moving through the halls, soft whispers trailing behind them, like children talking in a language I couldn't understand. I didn't dare open the door. I just sat there in the darkness, barely breathing. The next day, I couldn't shake the dread that settled in my chest. I went to the local store, hoping to find someone to talk to ground myself in reality. But when I stepped inside, it was like I had entered another world. The place smelled of mildew and decay, the shelves stacked high with dusty, expired goods. There was no cashier, no customers, only silence. I turned to leave, but as I reached for the door, I saw something on the counter, an old, tattered photograph. I picked it up, curiosity gnawing at me. It was a picture of the town taken years ago, but what caught my attention was the group of children in the background. They were all staring directly at the camera, their eyes wide and empty, like they were begging for help. I couldn't look away. As I studied the photo, I noticed something strange. In the reflection of the glass behind them, there was something else, something dark, a shape. I couldn't make it out clearly, but it was there. And then I heard it, a voice. Soft at first, barely a whisper, but then, louder, a child's voice calling my name. I dropped the photo, my heart hammering in my chest. I didn't know where the voice had come from, but it was coming from inside the store, or was it? I bolted out the door, my feet carrying me faster than I thought possible, back to the safety of my room. But when I got there, I found something worse. The bed was made, the room tidy, too tidy, the chair by the window. The one I'd left facing away from the street was now turned toward the door, and the window, which I could have sworn I had locked, was cracked open just a fraction. I didn't touch anything. I just stood there, feeling a coldness creeping up my spine. Something was waiting for me, something that had been there all along. I tried to leave. I packed my things, ran down the stairs, and burst out the door. But as I stepped into the street, I froze. The town had changed. The once empty houses now had lights flickering in their windows. I could hear faint laughter in the distance, the kind of innocent sound you'd expect from children playing. But there was something off about it. It sounded wrong, too hollow, too echoing. I didn't want to turn around. I didn't want to look, but I did. And when I did, I saw them. Children standing at the edge of the street, staring at me. Their faces were pale, stretched in ways that no child's face should be. Their mouths hung open in unnatural grins. Their eyes wide with hunger. Their eyes, those same eyes from the photograph, were all looking at me, waiting. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. My body refused to obey. And then, just as the first child began to step forward, I heard it. The whisper again. But this time, it wasn't coming from the children. It was coming from the ground beneath me, from the very earth of this forsaken town. You shouldn't have come here. And that's when I knew they weren't waiting for me to run. They were waiting for me to join them. I don't know how long I stood there, unable to move. My mind was slipping. The town was closing in around me, every sound, every breath, every moment pulling me deeper into the nightmare. I tried to scream, but nothing came out. And then, in the dead of night, the lights flickered out and the laughter stopped, Now, I can only hear the whispers. The ones coming from the walls, from the floor, from beneath my feet. They're calling me by name. The children, the ones in the picture, they won't let me leave. I don't know how much longer I have before I become one of them, but I know this. Whatever is in this place doesn't want us to remember. It doesn't want anyone to know the truth, and I am the last one left to hear it.